Hello, I'm Ben. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to talk about a reference book that I would suggest that if you're in consulting or if you're in leadership that you take the time to read because it also can impact how you evaluate and support your teams as well as clients or customers. The book is called Clients for Life, and there that is, Clients for Life. I will put that as the thumbnail in the video as well. And basically this book dives down into roughly a blueprint for enduring client relationships, right? So you build a relationship with a client. The expectation hopefully is that you sustain your clients, because a client that you already have is a lot less expensive than clients you don't have, meaning it costs a lot to find new clients. So it's best to take care of those that you have and serve them. The book goes into details around these thoughts. So experts are specialists, and good advisors become deep generalists that have a broad perspective. So the idea is you're never going to win by arguing with a client. So if you get into serving that client, the best way to find out what they need is to ask. And what you want to do is you want to offer them as a consultant, as a professional, deep generalist. You want to offer them information so they can pick from that and determine which path is what they want for their business. So that's a key call out for this book, and I think it's a pretty smart subject line. Next is experts are for hire. Advisors have selfless independence, balancing client devotion with objectivity and detachment, meaning you don't want to get sold and get emotional about a single thought process or a single suggestion to the client. What you want to do is you're building a relationship, which means you should be here for a very long time. So you don't want to get caught up on this present situation, because you will hopefully serve this client across a number of different situations. So that's why you don't want to be limited. You want to be objective, and you want to be detached from a specific thought process. If the client wants to walk down a certain path, then you follow that path with them and give them the best objectivity and solutions that you can come up with that path. Experts have a professional credibility. Advisors develop deep personal trust. So go back to that relationship building. People, once people trust you, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? So once you develop that trust, once you earn it, you don't want to lose it, because typically when you lose trust, you don't earn it back. But that kind of goes into that piece around being a trusted advisor, that deep personal trust. If you're able to cultivate that with a client, no one can take that client from you. You will always be in the picture. You'll always be someone that they think you'll be in their circle of influence. They'll think, hey, this person cares, and we need to reach out to them to see what their point of view is that may be different from ours. The more opinion and supported objectives that you have in front of you, the better decision making you can make to serve your customers, right? Or serve the end customer. So if you're assisting a client in a way that's going to help them with their customers, you're serving that end customer too by being that trusted professional. Experts analyze, advisors synthesize, and bring big picture thinking to the table. So I've often said that in business, typically with even big corporations, if they have a short-sighted human being that's making decisions based on their opinions and their feelings, not the long-term success of the team. The way I suggest in business you have long-term success is you expect that you're going to retire from there, and so are your teammates. If you're doing that, then every day you're making the proper decisions that are going to be successful and make the business successful for a long time. You're not trying to do something that's going to spike some seasonality where it looks really, really good because now you're trying to hop off of that into a different role or to a different profession. You want to focus on the actual overall longevity and success of the business. And then another call out is experts supply expertise and information, while advisors are educators who provide insight and wisdom. As a consultant, that insight and wisdom that you're cultivating for your clients, it helps them grow so they understand the business better. That's the point of this channel. I go into subjects that a lot of people find difficult that to me, I've studied and I've practiced and I've been in business for decades. So I have distinct, specific knowledge of these things. And I've also improved businesses and turned them around many times. And what's interesting about that is the methods I use are successful across multiple different business lines in everything I've seen, from small business to large business. So that wisdom, it basically says if you follow this course and you stay the course, that's how you take care of it. And here's something I'll call out. I have friends that were clients of mine when I was in my teens. They are still clients of mine today. I'm a trusted advisor, and every time I make a job change or I make a title change, I reach out via email and let them know. So we've sustained that relationship because that trust that I've earned with them, that's still there. And should they need me for something else, I'm happy to offer those services. So let me give you a quote here from Ray Smith, former chairman and CEO of Bell Atlantic. He said, "A great professional helps you eliminate issues that are not the problem. And then he focuses you in a really critical dimension of the situation. You are permitted to be a bit confused and, in general, not sure on which path to take. And at the right moment, the good ones ask the right questions. It's an iterative, interviewative process. You don't want someone peddling a solution who comes with an agenda, which many do." That's the strongest part of the quote and why I put it in there. A lot of people go into a client conversation with something they've already booked and built and ready to pitch. The problem with that is now you're talking about a sales procedure for a single solution versus a relationship where you want to support them in the best way possible so they trust you to come back again, as opposed to a one-point sale. You don't want someone peddling a solution who comes with an agenda, which many do. The good advisor excels in the interrogation process, but he doesn't necessarily arrive at the solution for you. He knows my industry, but is broader than that. And finally, he can bring you comfort as well. Empathy, not sympathy. And that's Ray Smith, former chairman and CEO of Bell Atlantic. So that used to be one of the largest telecommunications companies in the world. And so to tell you how consultants work, a lot of times you get hired as a project manager or a lean manager or a consultant, process consultant for those folks. And that's how he felt about it. So 3 barriers that stand in the way of becoming an excellent advisor to your clients. One is most professional service firms demand specialization. The more you specialize, the less you generalize, the more you are limiting your ability to market and to assist with different industries, right? Like I said earlier, when I put things on my resume, I talk about operations and team leadership specifically, because all businesses are operations and all teams need leadership. That's just how that works. So I'm not specializing in the medical field or manufacturing or retail, and sometimes that limits the number of roles that you can be offered, but it doesn't limit the number of contracts you requested on. So generalize, don't specialize. The barrier number 1 is most professional service firms demand specialization. Barrier number 2 is expertise is becoming automated and reduced to a commodity. Expertise is becoming automated and reduced to a commodity. Thought process is a lot of people think they know a lot, and since things are automated, you don't reach out to that professional anymore. You just take the loss as a loss. I've talked about that before in companies that make too much money. They're too cash strong, so waste is waste, and they're fine with it. Well, from a lean standpoint, from a lean manufacturing standpoint, from 6S or 6 Sigma, 5S, any of those protocol, you reduce waste, and it's the best thing for the business because it keeps the cash flow in the business and it keeps processes lean and inspected regularly so they're safer for your customer and for your client, because of your product line comes out in the same way, but also for your teams. Those processes that are reviewed and looked at regularly are safer processes and keep your team safe. So expertise is becoming automated and reduced to a commodity, meaning people don't have expertise anymore. They have specified things that they're very smart about, right? So that's the second call out on barriers to in the way of becoming a business advisor. The next thing I want to call out, and this kind of goes with some of the information I've said so far. Really good professionals ask great questions. If you come with a solution, every single time you have a pitch, you're not going to ask great questions. What you're going to do is try to drive that conversation to one end. That's a good way to make a sale, but it's not a great way to make a client. The best business advisors have good understanding of my industry, but also a breadth, meaning you may have other industries that aren't related to that one where you can pick up best practices that would be very impactful in this industry. Okay, so go back to operations, go back to team leadership. Those things are all going to be the same across all industries because you have the same human beings working in those places, right? Good professionals are great listeners. They hear what you mean, not what you say. Context is key. If you're going to be an advisor, if you're going to be a consultant, you need to hear what's between the lines. So sometimes they'll say it's cost prohibitive, when in actuality it's waste because they keep reworking things, which increases their cost per unit. So if you can cut the waste, you cut the cost. So you have to hear what they're not saying, and you do that by paying attention and listening effectively and accurately, as opposed to having a solution and trying to pitch a sale. Good professionals are great listeners. Investment bankers cannot be true advisors because they're too focused on the deal. You hear some commonality of some of the quotes there. So the biggest thing is to generalize, listen, and not be there to pitch a single solution. You want the customer to pick the solution, and he'll typically tell you what that is through the questions that you ask them. Okay? There are 3 types of distinct independence that great professionals exercise. Intellectual independence is the first one, and that means you know why the employer is looking at you. You know that they have a thought process that they follow, and they expect that your intellectual independence is outside of that. So not only do you understand their point of view, but you understand alternative point of views too that might offer better solutions and other options around the solution. Okay, so intellectual independence is number 1. Emotional independence is number 2. If you're emotionally independent from the deal and from the specific client, meaning you care about them, empathy but not sympathy, there may be a situation where staying calm and centered while the organization is hitting walls, you can offer solutions because you're not feeling the pain that they're feeling. You're showing that empathy, but not sympathy, so you're able to walk them through it, which is extremely important because sometimes when you're too close, that's the old, you miss the forest for the trees type thing. Sometimes the answer could be right in front of you, but people are just too close to it. That is why a lot of people hire external consultants, because they've been working on the same thing, hitting the same nail with the same hammer for a very long period of time, and all they do is change the hammer when the problem is the nail. So you have to figure out those things. And then the third is financial independence. Advisors that have to cultivate a mindset, of independent wealth, meaning my whole life isn't tied to this deal. Okay? If I am successful and I can support myself, I'm going to give you the best options around your selectivity on solutions because I'm not going to try to pick the one that pays me the most. So it's not deal related, it's relationship related. Okay? Selflessness is a part of that, and selflessness has dimensions to it. So let's talk about that. In selflessness, you're not focusing on your sale. You're focusing on your client's agenda rather than your own. You have an understanding that you are there to support and serve your client's needs, not make your sale, right? You have a willingness to share or even relinquish control of the relationship based on what's better. Sometimes you drive, sometimes you let them drive. And that way you continue the thoughts coming and the creativity coming. You engage creativity, you're not shutting it down. This is all parts of being selfless. A conviction that your responsibility as an advisor is to supply the right questions and allow your client to supply the answer. That's a big component of it, where you don't have to be Mr. Know-it-all. You don't have to be Mr. Right. You're supplying questions so they can think it through and supply answers. That way you don't look like the genius, but you look like a collaborative piece of a team that is extremely important and extremely valued. Okay, so that's selflessness as well. Next is respect for clients. I won't go into that any further. If you don't respect yourself and you don't respect your clients, you don't deserve to have them. The next is self-effacement. If you know there's something wrong or you've done something for them that's not as good as what you should have done, or you step out of the way and let them receive the credit, let them receive the glory. So I've worked with folks before as a consultant where I worked on this tier here, and I let them take credit for the stuff that I put in play. Why? Because I got paid the same either way, whether it was my idea or not. And then when this person needed me, they always reached out. But here's the next piece. This company knew how valuable I was, but when this teammate moved elsewhere, they still remembered how valuable I was and how I put them in that place. So guess what? I just got a new customer because one of my former clients' representatives moved to another location. Keep the old customer, get a new customer because of the respect you pay those clients. So self-effacement and respect for your clients. And the last I'll say there is your ability to see your clients' needs undistorted, just as they are. Don't put your spin on it. Step back, see them as they are, and understand them like that. Okay? How your behavior and outlook might reflect in the mindset of an independent wealth or as a client thinks that there's independent wealth, what that shows is you look like you're stable. You don't look like you're an ambulance chaser. You know, in an attorney world, that's a common thing that people say, oh, you're an ambulance chaser, because lawyers are stacked up at the hospital to see who wrecked, et cetera, et cetera. You want to propose additional work for a client because you believe it's absolutely the right thing for them to do, even if you're not doing it with them. When you do that, that behavior shows I'm here to do the right thing for you, period. I'm not here to pad my pocket. That just goes in that thought process that we've already talked about. You don't have a take on client specific assignments, and you don't ever compromise the integrity of work you do. I have left projects, I have left companies before because the integrity of the work was put into question because they wanted to complete a certain project amount, or they wanted to meet a deadline that ultimately was dissolved and was not meetable based on the expectations. As expectations migrate and goalposts move, so should the deadline. You can't say we're going to start here, we need to have this resolution, this solution by this date, and then change what it is we're doing and the path we're walking to get there. Okay? So you have to take a hard look at that client list. Make sure the client's right for you. That's one thing that I was very proud of as a young man when I was in the mortgage business. I only served the clients that were right for me. And I fired clients, and I lived off a commission and fired clients. It was very simple. If somebody was being dishonest with me and not putting things right on the page, I'm not going to jail for somebody for lying on a truth form, right? Because ultimately in lending, you have a truth in lending document. Well, you expect those people to be able to give you what they say they can. And so that jigginess, if you want to be a professional, you have to move those clients that aren't appropriate for you away from you. Integrity matters. Is when you want to build a relationship, integrity matters. When you're just going after the sale, we all know about that. We all have dealt with used car salesmen that just lie, cheat, and steal to get you into something and move on. So you kind of have to make sure you're watching that. Empathy is the key to personal effectiveness. So empathy is the ability to perceive other people's emotions and thoughts. Empathy. The ability to perceive other people's emotions and thoughts. The power of empathy is it helps you understand the character and the perspectives and the motivations as well as the values of the people you're dealing with. Okay? If you don't understand those things, you can't properly serve that person or that team. So it allows you, by understanding the character, perspectives, motivations, and the values, it allows you then to form a deep, meaningful relationship from a personal standpoint and a professional standpoint. You are building a relationship. You only live one life, right? I heard it said one time, don't go through this life like it's a dress rehearsal. You only have one life. Do what you want to do. Be determined and intentful in that. Build those relationships and you will be supported through that. The world's changed, in recent years because of the internet and how many options people have. But in the end, ultimately, empathy enables you to learn about your clients, make more innovative and effective solutions for them, but then build the belief that you do care so they stick with you with all that noise being out there around them. Okay? There's a ton of great context in this book. I suggest that you read it to go through it. It does call back, some of the fundamental preconditions for empathy and for professionalism, meaning you have the right attitude, you're self-aware, your emotions are under your self-control, you're controlling around how you respond to things, and you practice specific empathetic listening skills. If you want to shut someone down, think about your response instead of hearing what they're saying. And also remember earlier, to give them proper solutions, you have to be able to hear what they say and understand what they're saying, but you need to understand what they're not saying as well, that read between the lines. If you're showing empathy, you're able to do that. You want to make sure that you don't let lag between communications, from understanding or listening, or culture, or authority, or prestige, or experts. You don't want those things to ever get in your way or conspire against you when it comes to supporting your client. You want to make sure that you have those things well under thumb and you expect what should be coming down the pipe, expect the unexpected. Make sure you're talking with the decision maker, you've gotten past the gatekeepers, and you've done it in a respectful way. And if you've done that and you've treated those gatekeepers respectfully, they can bring you business too when they move elsewhere. So you're just building your book of business with every relationship you build and every human you speak to and every relationship you touch. Okay. Always listen at the most involved level. Make sure you're being on top of that. Here's your levels of listening. There's 3 levels. Level 1 is engaging and empathetic listening, during which you listen deeply, actively observe, and interpret nonverbal cues. You have to be there paying attention. Get the cell phone out of there. Put the computer away. Pay attention to what the person in front of you is saying so you can get the underlying message behind the words, okay? That's number 1. That's the level 1 of listening. Level 2 of listening is hearing all the words, but not necessarily understanding their full meaning. You're not observing or turning in those nonverbal clues as communication as well. Remember, 80% of communication is nonverbal. So if you can be in the room and you can ask these questions and do the things in the room, you can pay opportunity rather. There's a better opportunity, a better chance to pay attention to nonverbal clues. So you're sticking into that level 1 of communication. Level 3 is listening only to the parts of the conversation, tuning out, getting distracted, doing other things, multitasking, which we all think is some resume-worthy word. You recognize and you eliminate all the personal filters and you put the client first. Okay, so that's listening. You would always make sure you're listening in the most involved level. Recognize and eliminate your personal filters. Think hard about what your client is going to say and what they're trying to say. Ask guiding questions to help the client find their own answers and to help you guide yourself to those solutions, or where you can give the creative suggestions where they can come to their own solutions. Seek honest feedback from clients about your performance, the conduct in that performance, and the relationship and what they feel about the relationship. Always seek feedback. That is the most valuable thing you can seek as a consultant or as a professional of any kind. If you seek feedback, it will give you the opportunity to grow. It will give you the opportunity to learn from that and to be better next time. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So remember, whether it's you learning or teaching, you will find what you're looking for and you will be able to give what other folks are looking for. Aristotle was one of the greatest teachers of all time, right? And he was studied still to this day for thousands of years. One of my favorite books includes 3 writings from him. Aristotle instilled his passion for learning in a gentleman who ultimately dominated the world, Alexander the Great. Alexander, who, according to legend, as he moved across the earth and took control and took power over things, all of those conquests, he sent stuff back home to Aristotle to use and to look at and to study so he could increase his level of understanding. And Aristotle, in turn, would then invite other scholars to come see what was there. So basically, he became the student because his student now was the teacher and sending him things from these areas and telling him what they used it for. So he became the student to study and then share to the world the importance and efficacy of these new and great discoveries. So just think about that. The teacher at some point becomes the teacher, the student, and the student at some point becomes the teacher. And honestly, you're living your life hopefully fully engaged all of your life. So that means you're going to go back and forth out of these roles constantly, and that's part of growth. That's part of the human experience. So I hope you enjoy that. I definitely do. That's why I have all those books back there and the ones in the library, and I have all that interest around study. That's why these videos are being published, so you can watch them and you can hopefully glean some of that information for yourselves off of this too. The other piece around being a learner, and learning is allowing you to become a better teacher to serve your clients, right? If you're an explorer and you're an exploratory learner, like what we were just talking about, and you listen for pleasure and you listen to learn, and you're exploratory and learning where you establish your expertise and then you continuously grow out from that, that's how you continue to grow and you increase the impact you can have for your clients. Lifelong students are the only people I want around me. It's the only people I want to have an impact on my day. So think about the learning focus. Direct experience means hands-on. Study, that means you're reading and looking back on what's there. Observation, where you observe other people doing a thing and learn how to do it that way. And modeling. Modeling is the final approach where you then put yourself in those shoes and you try to do the same thing based on what you've already suggested as a solution. So that is extremely important that you know those different types of learning and you put all of them in place. Different people learn different ways. So if you have taught a subject in a way where all four of those different learning types can learn, you've taught it to yourself better than anyone else can, because through teaching you will learn. So talk about the deep generalist thing. That's what I was saying. It's more important to be a deep generalist than to be specialized. Have an observational knowledge, a usable knowledge. So when clients ask for your advice, they respect your judgment because you've answered correctly about issues within your expertise and beyond your core professional expertise, because there will be similarities across all schools of thought. To be a deep generalist, you should enjoy exploring subjects that have nothing to do with your work. To be a deep generalist, you should find something interesting in just about everyone you meet and every situation you encounter. It really allows you to get more out of life when you do that. So that whole appreciate everything attitude of gratitude, it really is impactful in this deep generalist thought process and being effective in that professional role. You want to make changes on your professional focus around building the relationship beyond just making the sale. Sometimes if you're in sales and you took a sales job for a while to get out of a bad gig, interviewers will ask you, why have you been doing sales? Why'd you get out of leadership? Why are you doing sales now? It seems like you were in a different role. That shows you how people view things, that you have to be either or. The idea should be your whole life you're spending studying and learning so you can better perform throughout the remainder of your entire life, right? No dress rehearsal here. Two well-known frameworks have become very influential around growth and sharing and how to grow. One's the growth share matrix, which basically it puts stars for high market share, things that are most important. It puts question marks around low market share, things that you may not be doing. It puts cash cows, so you put a superlative on things that you know produce a lot, but they may not perform a lot. And then you have dogs, which are low market share, which don't do very well, but they may be steady. They may be, winning from a long-term standpoint or from a long fixed view. So you'll have things ranked on that. That's the growth matrix, the growth share matrix. And then you have Stephen Covey's time management model, which you guys know I'm a fan of that model through videos that I've done, which basically you track your things over time. You know that there's a compounding effect, that the more you do over time, the more impact you're going to have, the more successful you're going to be. So that's my better viewpoint. Ken Blanchard, I quote him often, but basically he says you have to have something to aspire to daily, regularly, so you can continue to grow. I agree with that thought process. Thomas More, chief advisor to King Henry VIII, he wrote that a man must choose himself some secret, solitary place in his own house, far from noise and company and conventionality, where he can have some time to secretly sit alone and imagine himself going out of the world. So basically, you shut everything off so you continue to grow and focus on these things that are important to you so you can better serve yourself. And in better serving yourself, that better self-knowledge builds better self-confidence, and you can better serve those that you are a consultant for and an advisor for. Some of the most creative people say that they can throw away bad ideas much more quickly than others, and that makes them more competitive. So they can throw away bad ideas. We mentioned that earlier. Don't fall in love with something just because it's what you came to. You may have better options through observation and education that would serve your client better. So don't marry an idea. Be flexible and be able to move through those things. And that keen judgment is one of the most valuable assets a professional can have, because you're going to be able to see what's there and what's not going to be there. And hopefully you're objective enough to say, hey, if you walk this path, you look for four moves in the future, just like a proper chess player would do. You're not just focused on the move you're making right now. You're saying, all right, he does this, I'm going to do that. He does this next, I'm going to do that. And you basically walk through the whole thought or value stream to better direct how you're going to end up once it's all completed. Okay, once that body of work is completed, you want to add the most value with removing the most waste to make it the most impactful value stream. So let's talk about best practices. The fact is, avoiding bad decisions is one half of the battle. Avoiding bad decisions is one half of the battle. Even if you don't make particularly good ones, you can muddle along and survive, whereas poor judgment can put you out of business for good. Many businesses fail because they make bad decisions, or they don't stop at the moment they figure out that one is a bad decision, because this is the way they've always done it. So that's an extremely great call out here. 5 of the most important judgment traps that professionals should be aware of as they advise their clients are: 1, weak premises. Starting out on the wrong foot. Start and restart as often as possible, or as often as you need, to make sure you're not starting on the wrong foot. Confirmation, don't see what you want to see. Look at it for what it is, ask those questions, and make sure you're seeing what's there. Overconfidence, underestimating what it takes to succeed. You don't want to go into something thinking you've got it beat when you're 2 steps into the journey. It takes a long period of time to figure things out and make sure you're doing what you should. Prior commitments, making new inappropriate commitments based on previous ones. Just because you had something that went well at one point, that shouldn't influence you to do or not to do something else in the future. I mentioned earlier how the things I did in this industry translated well to this industry and carried on through. Had I been afraid or made prior commitments and not taken the new ones, I wouldn't have had the opportunity for the increased success across other business lines. So remember that. In the book Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, Robert Cialdini gives many examples of how every small prior commitment can induce a level-headed individual to agree to things that make no sense. So just like we talked about, it's kind of like to put the frog in the pot and you increase the heat until it boils and the frog won't jump out. It's that idea that when you rest on that, you'll start agreeing with things. And the federal government's a good example of that. You think, how on earth can cognitive thinking, intelligent people make decisions like this? Well, that's how. If you do something that's bad long enough, just like in that book, Ordinary People, that I've talked about and that Jordan Peterson's talked about, those were normal police officers that got to the point where the 200 of them killed 5,000 innocent people in the time of the Holocaust. I mean, these were awful things that each day they stretched themselves just a little bit, and over a long period of time they were able to do incredibly horrible things because they normalized these small things. So that's what it's talking about. Prior commitments, you want to stay appropriate. You want to do the right thing, not just what you've already done. And then number 5 is groupthink. Us against them, whether it's either or. I've heard things about Jerusalem, the 10th man, and those type things where you have someone that always stands against the group because it's a better practice. I think that's a great idea. Left and right, 2-party systems are stupid because ultimately it's us versus them. It's never collaborative, and you lose a ton of time and there's no objectivity to it. But that's how you think about it, is you don't want to think in absolutes. At any given day, someone that you didn't know yesterday can become your best friend. That's how people meet and they get married. They're strangers one day, and the next day they mean everything in the world. And then the opposite is true. You can be married to someone, and then 5 years later you're divorced, and you don't know where they are in the world, you don't know what they're doing or whatever else. So don't get stuck on those things. Make sure that you're using good judgment. 5 steps to good judgment are these. 1, frame problems appropriately at the outset. Be objective. Make sure what it is what it is. Frame problems appropriately at the outset. 2, engage in creative but selective fact gathering. Be creative, gather the facts for what they are. Be creative but selective in your fact gathering. Make sure it's around the problem that you've identified appropriately at the outset. 3 is use intuition. Leverage your professional experience and find similar patterns where it's relevant, right? And you can analyze that data and you can have that as support points. So make sure you use that intuition. The next is filter judgments through a clear set of professional beliefs and values. Make sure you're not making the deal versus making the relationship, right? Don't be there to sell a deal, be there to build the proper relationship so you can handle more problems over the length of the business. And the last, be honest enough to learn from the experience. So whether you get the desired result or it starts you back at the starting line to do the process again, you should be okay with either one. You're moving forward, get to the right answer through handling the right process as a professional. There are three major pitfalls that prevent us from learning from an experience. One, we claim credit for all their successes. That's awful. If you have a leader that claims credit for all the successes, get out of there, because that's not a leader. That's a boss, and that's a malignant boss that's going to take everyone down with them. Next is we minimize and dismiss our failures. Do not do that. Failures are as important or more important than wins. When you study what made you fail, you get better and you learn. When you hide it and minimize it, there's no growth from that. You're doing yourself an inservice, and you're leading your team down the wrong path. And the third is we distort actual events in our favor. They often say history is remembered by the winners, right? Those who didn't win, there's a loss in history. We don't want to distort actual events. That's why documentation and review should be a regular thing, because you want the truth to be the truth, period, not just the truth as you remember it. Techniques to develop better judgment are overinvest in problem identification, so you have it thought through and you have that documented. 2, examine alternative problem definitions. Make sure the problem is well defined so everybody involved understands what it is. 3, make sure the problem is really a priority. You don't want to spend all this time and effort on something that really is not going to have a grand impact. You want the grand impact to increase productivity, increase safety, increase quality, and reduce waste. You don't want to focus on things that don't do at least one or two of those items. Ask disconfirming questions. So ask questions that go against your selective solutions to make sure that you're not missing something or there's not a better solution altogether, and develop standard and outlandish alternatives. So sometimes the best way to tell a story is paint a ridiculous picture. When you do that, people get what you're saying. I do that often in leadership groups. So that will help you. And then the final piece is engage in perspective hindsight. So after you close a project, don't forget the learnings in the project, because something may still be good enough to hold on to that you did not use in your solution. So that may need to become a project on its own, and you can go back. In doing that and understanding your client's tolerance for risk and uncertainty and the need for the growth and the continuous improvement, you can really enhance your ability to reach for patterns for the client, but also from your own experience that make you a better asset to the client. So that's something to think about there. You know, when it comes to critical thinking, you have to think critically to be able to use good judgment and to be able to support your good judgment. So make sure that all these processes we're talking about, you're documenting as you move through the timetable, so you can see the similarities in what's sustained. And if something changes and it nosedives quickly, you can look at and see the change and advise on that. And it's always fine to say, I don't have enough information, or, you know, we're not convinced of this, but the conviction of the client is to go in this path. You can document that and you can present that out in your results findings so people know you didn't make a complex decision that impacted the client negatively. So then you develop your own conviction around that based on the values and the beliefs that you have and the values and beliefs that your client has. Remember, you want to select the clients that match your belief system. And that's going to be what is most intense and memorable. And that's what's going to give your client the greatest opportunity to be appreciative of what you've done. Let's go back to Aristotle. Aristotle sets out the following criteria for arriving at sound ethical decisions. And we'll close with this. This is a 38-minute video so far, but this is worth calling. And if you should look into Aristotle and look into his writings. They're pretty great. But right here, Aristotle sets out the following criteria for arriving at sound ethical decisions. The first one is you have to develop your character and become a sound, thoughtful, mature individual. If the people sitting at your table aren't that, if they're not sound, thoughtful, and mature, get away from that table, okay? The next is you have to develop your ethical instinct. This embraces common sense, logic, attention to ethical principles, and attention to detail throughout. So think about that. Think about the world that we've lived in recently. You have to develop your ethical instinct, embraces common sense, logic, attention, and ethical principles. Here's the thing. There's people's opinion of the world and there's the real world. The real world operates off of common sense. People don't, but the real world does. So if you're at a table where people are talking about strange things that don't suggest scientific understanding or factual understanding, if there's blue hair involved, bounce. All right, pick a client where you actually are going to be dealing in real world things that deal with common sense and logic, so you can have a real world impact and support them in protecting their their customers, support them in protecting themselves and their team. Okay, you should draw important ethical, moral, and social practices in the culture where you live and wherever you are is my suggestion. Don't let people impact how you do what you do. You have one life, you have one name, you have one character reference, right? And that comes from your efforts. If you're a criminal, you will be a criminal. You don't want to become a criminal because you let people influence you ethically or morally. You want to make sure you stand firm to what you believe. Then ultimately it is what it is. And then the last one is you have to understand the relevant facts about the situation. You have to understand the relevant facts about the situation. If you are looking at the facts of the situation, you make better decisions to serve yourself, serve your client, serve those all that are involved. And that's what you have to do. And if you're developing this trust, like what we've talked about, you'll conduct assignments based on minimum documentations. Once you've agreed to the objectives and you have the deliverables, the client's going to trust you to follow through, and the client's going to trust you to render the right information. You want to provide value-added compensation to the client through your actions, your efforts, or the value they gain. Pretty great book. A lot of wisdom in here. There's some pictures that are pretty good. In the back, it talks about historical advisors, which are really worth looking into. And I'll read through those real quick to tell you who they are. The Oracle of Delphi is one that lived from around 600 BC to 362 AC. For 1,000 years, this person was a consultant to the leaders of Greek. According to tradition, the god Apollo responded to advanced seekers through Pythia, the oracle, and basically led people to live a blameless life. The next is Aristotle, which we've mentioned several times, 384 to 322 BC. He spoke and taught on soul, on pleasure, on sciences, on magnets, and on proverbs. One of the greatest thinkers in human history. Next was Merlin, maybe a fictional figure, but some historians believe that he was a real person. That is 450 to 536 AD. Next is Niccolo Machiavelli. Machiavelli is best known for his book, The Prince. And if you haven't read that, you should read it. And if you don't understand that, that's fine. Put it down for 5 years and then pick it up and read it again. That book has relevant changes through it as you go through life and learn more every 5 years. Thomas More, he was a servant leader and servant advisor to Henry VIII. And he had some disagreements with Henry VIII and how he handled his wives, and ultimately was killed by Henry VIII. And you can read about him in the life of Thomas More. It's a pretty great work. It was written by Peter Ackroyd. So give that book a look. It was written in 1999. Pretty good book. But More lived from 1478 to 1535. Armand Jean du Plessis Richelieu, which is Cardinal Richelieu, was an advisor to a couple separate kings, Louis XIV being the one, or actually 13th, being the one that stands to mind. 1585 to 1642 was his lifespan. Balthasar Garçon, John Perpe Morgan, Gertrude Bell, George Marshall, Harry Hopkins, Peter Drucker, David Ogilvy, Henry Kissinger, and I think there's several. Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha. I think there's several that are advisors in recent centuries that are worth listening to as well. Zuckerberg could be one that you call out on that with technological use. Maybe even Michael Dell or Bill Gates. So the thing about advisors and becoming one professor, remember that you put the client first, right? And you put the relationship first, and everything comes after that. A little bit of a longer video today, but I hope you enjoyed it. If you like subjects like these, please like and subscribe. The work we were talking about today was Clients for Life, evolving from an expert for hire to an extraordinary advisor, and that was written by Jagdish Seth and Andrew Sobel. Clients for Life. Please like, please subscribe, please share. Be good.